Hi Rupert, I'd like to take your mind back to September of this year when you wrote an article entitled The 14 Top Tips to Doing a Successful Acquisition. And I'd like to kind of probe that a little bit more and delve into some of your deal experiences and see if you've learnt any kind of lessons from those experiences. So if I can imagine I'm a client, a new client, a prospective new client. I've come in to meet you today, looking to embark on a buy and build strategy. What kind of key initial advice could you give me as to how to go about implementing that strategy?
To start with, there's probably three key things to think about. Firstly is, what is that strategy? What are you trying to achieve? And with that is then just stick with it. Don't chop and change as you go through the process. Secondly, make sure you've got some proper advisors strapped around you. It's not just law, have you got tax and have you got sort of deal advisory, for example, and with that we've got our team here led by Paula. And I think the third thing then is look after the existing business. You've got to make sure that what you've got continues to grow and evolve as you want it to, and don't get distracted by the acquisitions because they can be hugely time intensive and as a result massively distracting.
Imagining me as a client, it's our second meeting now, and we've got a set of heads of terms which I'm looking to discuss, but I'm sensing that the seller's proving to be a little bit awkward, a little bit resistant to certain terms. Is there any sort of advice or guidance you could give me as to how to kind of navigate a difficult seller?
Yeah, I mean, personal relationships are just absolutely critical with all these things. If you don't understand what the seller's concerns are, what their requirements are, it's very, very difficult to get the transaction done. Now, that psychology is critical. So I think, I always say just go and have dinner with them. Find out what it is that's absolutely important to them. You've got to remember, for many sellers, the company or business that you're buying is probably their baby. They probably built it from not a lot, and therefore it is incredibly important to them. So understand that, and also understand what the sellers themselves want in the long run. We've got examples of sellers who want to sell and walk out the door and never be involved again, and you've got other sellers who are very keen to be involved in that handover. Whether that is the right thing and whether you need them in the longer term is perhaps a completely different question, but actually understanding what their needs and requirements are will actually really help how you deal with them.
So understanding their priorities at the outset is key.
Absolutely.
Understanding what they want ultimately after the deal's done, whether it's retirement or to stay with the business. So it comes down to communication at the end of the day. Good communication lines and probably keeping that dialogue going throughout the deal process.
Communication at all levels. Be that from solicitor to solicitor, or be that from client to client, or other advisor to other advisor. And actually it is really helpful sometimes to have different pieces of communication at different points. So if, for example, the solicitors get hung up on a particular point, then maybe that is the time for the client to talk to the client to try and resolve that particular issue. The problem is if you involve everybody at every stage in the process, and you hit a stopping, or you hit a difficult issue, it's actually quite difficult to resolve it because there's then nowhere to go. By actually allowing your advisors to deal with most of it, and then for the clients to come in when it matters, just gives that extra point or extra way to resolve the point in question.
I'm hearing quite a bit in the market that a lot of deals are getting bogged down in due diligence, not just necessarily legal due diligence. But again, based on your 25 plus years experience, sorry to labour that, what sort of guidance and advice could you give me as that imaginary client to streamline that due diligence process so you're cutting through it?
Well, it's kind of you to remind me that I've been doing this for over 25 years, which of course you've been doing far less amount of time, I know, but over those 25 years I've seen a massive difference in the depth of the due diligence process. Even the questionnaires, they used to be this thick, they're now this thick. And it's not just us, there's lawyers asking. We've got to bear in mind that it is also the deal advisory people asking, it is the accountants and the tax advisors and everybody else. So one of the most important things is to coordinate that process. So you make sure that the same question isn't being asked by several different people. Now, there's a perfectly valid reason why, for example, the tax guys may ask the same question as the lawyers, but they'll be asking it potentially for different reasons, but ultimately they want the same information. So particularly when you've got a buy and build strategy, you've got regular advisors, and certainly what I do for my biggest clients is I will talk to those other advisors that we work on deal in, deal out, and we agree with ourselves who's going to ask particular questions. Because from a seller, as you know, the due diligence process, you want to tear your hair out with it anyway, and it just makes it worse if you're getting the same question for the umpteenth time over.
I think, based on my own experience, I think tailoring that due diligence exercise to what your client really wants is vital to ensuring that it is done
Absolutely.
in a way that adds value and is done hopefully quicker than would ordinarily take. But I found, it's very much a collaboration between lawyer and client, and making sure that constantly, even if it's on a daily basis, it might prove to be a bit much, but having that continual dialogue throughout the due diligence stages where you're checking in with your client to make sure that what you're reviewing is what they want you to review, and hitting all the key notes, all the key points, so that when they finally do get that report, it's in a form and it contains information that they really want to read. I think that's massively important. So trying to tailor that due diligence report to what they ultimately want to see is vital.
No, I agree with that. I think there's two levels. One is what really matters to the business. We've all seen transactions where there's 2 employees, say, and you've got 3 pages of questions about employees. Is that proportionate? And the other thing is the materiality threshold. When you've got a huge transaction and suddenly people are asking about that debt collection of a £500 debt when you got a £50 million transaction, I know that's an extreme example, but it's just illustrative of ensure the materiality of the questions actually matter for the deal itself.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. Okay, so we've done the deal, all right? The temptation is to think that the hard work has been done and you can sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labour. But I think the reality is that that's when, for a client especially, that's when the hard work really begins. Again, from your vast deal experiences, what works well in that post-completion stage from your legal perspective?
I think we can help with that, because one of the things that we will do in our due diligence reports is actually set out a list of post-completion actions that we believe the client needs to have a look at. Now, some of them will be more material than others, but at least there's part of that to-do list that the client can focus on. I think a well-advised client will always have the notional 100-day plan, whatever it is going to be, things that they need to do going forward. And then it's integration and management. You can't just buy it and just assume it's going to run itself. And I've seen, as one of the examples I learned very early in my career, a client bought a business that was about 200 miles away from where their headquarters were, and bluntly, the management didn't go down to the new business, and it failed because the business didn't have that guidance it needed. And integration, you cannot have a them and us situation. It needs to be all brought together as soon as possible.
So being visible on the ground in the immediate days after the deal's done, really.
Absolutely.
Is vital to ensuring that integration process.
Yeah, but you've got to remember, every business will have a load of employees. They will be uncertain about their future. They'll want to know what's happening. And if you're not visible, then it's best chance of the employees going, I'm not feeling comfortable here, I'll go somewhere else.
To wrap up, what would you give me as that imaginary client, as that kind of one key takeaway from your deal experiences, that one big lesson that not you've learned, but a client of yours has learned in the past?
I think it's, go back a bit to that moment before completion, is this still the right deal? because, as you know, during the course of any transaction, you learn an awful lot about the business that you've got. The terms of the deal may change. You suddenly find that, for whatever it's, seller or buyer doesn't want to give some comfort that you thought you were going to get. But the problem is the momentum of the deal may feel like it's dragging you over the line. Just stop, ask yourself the question, is it still the right deal? Knowing what I know now, do I still want to do this? Because I've seen so many transactions, particularly when the completion is late at night and people are tired, and you start agreeing to things that bluntly you just regret. 6 months later, you suddenly find things aren't as you thought they were going to be, and you haven't got the recourse you thought, and you just have not got the deal you expected. So just always just stop, take stock, and with that, we will summarise to our clients, this is what the deal now looks like, and this is how it's changed from the heads of terms. Do you still want to go ahead? And you should always just take the time just to stop and ask yourself that question.
That sounds like very good advice to me. Thank you very much, Rupert.
Been a pleasure, John.